This is a DynaLite power pack and a DynaLite flash head. It's model M100X. They made a lot of different models. It's older and it's small in size and light in weight. I think it weighs about 12 pounds for the pack. And you might imagine that the strobe head is also small and lightweight. So these are old, 15 years, 20 years. I really, maybe older. I really don't know. They're no longer made. Like older packs, you have to be familiar with kind of working with power output in terms of watts, and I'm going to explain that in a minute. And there's also a couple of things here that are a little bit unique and something or things you may want to be aware of perhaps before picking one up. So I'm going to talk about that too, both on the pack as well as on the lights. So I guess the from what's unique on the pack, and that is how do you sync it to a wireless trigger, or how do you get it onto a sync cable? And if you look in the lower right-hand corner, that's where the sync port is. A lot of the times, in fact, all of the time, I've seen a sync port. Well, I shouldn't say all of the time, but many times it's either going to be a mini plug or it is going to be a phono plug, which is a round plug a little bit bigger, like on stereo headphones, or it is going to be what's called a household jack, which is very similar to what you're looking at here, except there's only two openings instead of three. I think that you don't need to worry about the three openings here. In fact, I know you don't because you can just use a household sync plug. And those are very easy to find. You can find them on Adorama or B&H or even Amazon. So you would just search for household sync to whatever it is you're, uh, you know, wireless trigger takes. So I like to use older Pocket Wizards. Those use a mini plug. So I just look for, the household sync to mini plug, or sometimes you could use a PC plug. Anyways, you get the idea. Just use household. Don't worry about the three prongs. While we're looking at the sync, right to the left of it is a slider dial. So you need to experiment with that a little bit in order to make sure that you're picking up either the sync port or if you want to use the slave, which is that red area. That those are common. That if a flash fires and you have it set to slave, then the pack's going to fire once it sees that other flash. And there is something called like IR1 and IR2. I think that's what they're called. And I believe those would be if you have, if whatever flash is controlling this strobe pack, if that is, let's say, TTL and it does multiple bursts of flash, then you want to experiment with, does it fire on the first burst or on the second burst? And I don't have one of those, so I haven't fooled with it. But the infrared port, the slave is fairly sensitive. I was taking a really small speed light, putting it on its lowest power, pointing it way away from the pack, even putting it in a different room from the room I'm in. And as long as you're inside, I haven't tried it outside. Sometimes they don't work that well outside the slaves. But at any rate, um, that's how you control that. And I guess while we're talking about another feature here, and that is when you take a look at the sockets for A and B, and if you look at them, first sighting is they're symmetrical, and that's certainly the case on the left and on the right, but the top and the bottom of these are not symmetrical. And you need to be aware of that when you're trying to connect the cable. Uh, and on the cable, I don't have a picture of it, but if you were to look at the end of the cable, what you will find is that there is a notch either on the top side or on the bottom side, and you need to line that notch up with the hole, if you will, that's at the top of these. So not only do you need to align the pins, the electrical pins, but you need to align this little plastic knob that sticks out of the cable, so that it fits into the slot that you could hopefully see at the top of, these sockets in A and B. And that's not, it's not the smooth. For me, it wasn't the smoothest process, and maybe that's because of the age of the pack and the condition of the one that I got. But once you get it plugged in, then you're all set. Um, and while we're talking about cables, I know I'm switching around here a little bit. That is actually one of the things I enjoy about the lamp head is that you can unplug the cable, which makes it really convenient to store. So sometimes if the cable is attached to the lamp head, when you're coiling it up and putting it in a case, it can be a little bit awkward. So having it separated makes it really easy to store it. That's one thing that I like about this. All these older packs have a lot of power, and at first blush, somebody could say, well, it's way too much power for a modern digital camera. But the way you want to think about this is this 1,000 watts is really split up into channel A and B. So there's a maximum of 500. Split it in two. You have two channels. There's a maximum for 500 in A and a maximum for 500 in B. And the way you control A or B output is by those white switches. They're on the in the upper left hand and in the upper right hand corner. There's little LED lights above the switches, and don't be confused by the slider to the right of the button on the left and to the left of the B button. Those sliders with the upside down triangles control the modeling lamp intensity. So I always just leave those turned off because I don't use the quartz modeling lamps. But the way you control the output for the power is, you flip the switch to 500. If you flip it to the middle, which is where it's set right now, it's going to be 125 watts. And if you flip it to the bottom, it's 250 watts. So what that means is if you have 500 dedicated to A and 500 dedicated to B, by switching the switches, you can take it down as low as 125 watts. And if you wanted to go a full stop below that in third stop increments, you could use the switch on the left in the middle called the variator. And the variator is going to be applied equally across both channel A and B. That can be a little frustrating if you're trying to fine tune lights in A and B. But the way I think of this is I get the power output through those switches to where I want it roughly, and then if I need to make an adjustment to take the light down by as much as a full stop, then I'm going to use the variator as the last step. And so how do you get the full 1,000 watts? Well, on these older packs, there is usually a switch, and in this case there is. It's in the middle right. And it's A:B means that A and B are separated, so maximum of 500 in A and maximum of 500 in B, or A plus B means you combine them. So let's say in the setting that I have it right now, A:B, and because I have both switches set to 125, the most I could get out of A is 125, the most I could get out of B is 125. If I were to combine A and B and still leave the switches at 125, then the most I would get out of A or B for one light would be 250. And you don't need to have the switches in the same setting. You could have A set to 500 and B set to 125. And if you combined A plus B, then one light put in here would throw 625 watts. And watts are just power output. And roughly, if you double the output of energy or the power, the watts, then you're adding a stop of light. If you cut that in half, you're taking a stop of light away. And you're probably already familiar with stops of light, the exposure triangle. If you double the ISO, you're adding a stop of light. If you double time, you're adding a stop of light. If you cut time in half, so go from 2 seconds to 1 second, you're taking a stop of light out. It's the same concept here. If you are doubling the power output from 250 to 500, you've added a full stop of light. So you just, if you can get your head around that, then you can work with these older packs. And a reason you're going to want to work with the older packs is because they're really, really, really inexpensive. And that is a great way if you're learning. You don't have to put a lot of money into this. If you want to augment your existing strobes, let's say you want to have background lights and you don't want to put a lot of money into it, you could pick up this used equipment, and if it's working, it's a very inexpensive way for you to add into your existing equipment. The lamps, the strobe heads are small and light. That is both good and bad. The good part is that you can put them on, you don't need a heavy light stand to put these on. You can put them high. So if you want to bounce it off of a ceiling, that's nice. A lot of times a style now is to work with hard light. So hard light, if you have the space in a studio, you're going to want to get the light really high and really far away from your subject. And because these are small and lightweight, you don't have to worry about raising them high. The reflector is built in, so you don't need to fool with that. The modifiers are limited. So the modifiers you could put on here, the only ones I've really seen are an adapter to put grids in front of it. I've never seen a speed ring, so I don't think you're going to use these with a softbox. They're so small, I don't think they would support a softbox. And they certainly take umbrellas. And I use diffusion, so you can shoot them through grid cloth, or you can shoot it through I like Savage Translum. You can bounce it off of a board, a white card. There are ways to use it. It's just if you're thinking the only way to use it is with a softbox, then this is not a good way to go. So yeah, I enjoy working with this. I haven't had it that long. I bought it with a bunch of other equipment, so it's going to end up not costing really anything because the other equipment is going to cover the cost of this, and they're small and lightweight, and they're kind of well built. So I like all of that stuff. Let me know if you have any kind of questions, or if you've had experience using these, and I'd be really interested to understand what your experience has been.